Hello! It is great to have you watching, listening, interacting, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. I'm glad that you are perceiving this. I hope you are looking forward to what we're going to be reading, what we're going to be discussing today. I hope you've had a good week since the last episode. I hope you're keeping safe. I hope you are healthy. And I hope you are enjoying every facet of life. Today we are coming back to the Gospel of John, chapter 6. Now, last time, of course, I did say that I would be trying to do each chapter as one whole chunk in one go. However, as those of you who are watching can see, I'm doing a part 1, which means there's going to be a part 2, which obviously means I'm cutting up the chapter into smaller chunks. Hopefully I won't have to do that all the time. That is because in this one we've got a particularly long chapter with a lot of meat in there, a lot of awesome information for us to get into. But this time we've got something a little bit different. We've got 2 amazing miracles from Jesus, and then a long explanation that comes out of a discussion that he has. So what I've chosen to do is, if we do a shorter one this time that is looking into his miracles in a bit more depth, and then next time we look into the discussion, we look into his preaching and teaching, basically. So that's how this is going to pan out. Why don't we go straight ahead and jump right in? So here we go. Jumping in, verse 1, I'll read it out. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountain and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. So, these first 4 verses, these first sentences, we are setting the scene. We know that from previously, Jesus has been travelling around. It's still really early days, I would say, but actually already, and we can see from the beginning of that second verse, a great crowd of people followed him. So, we have lots of attention coming onto him, and actually it's specified that they didn't just hear about him, they didn't just get some hearsay, they didn't just hear the rumours going around. It actually specifies so the people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed healing the sick. So they've actually witnessed these things, which means that he's actually been doing quite a lot. And it's actually identified in other parts of the Bible that, to be honest, if all of the deeds of Jesus were written down, there just wouldn't be enough room in the Bible to fit it all in. So I think this is one of those points where it's insinuated actually Jesus, yes, he's doing all the things that we've seen written down in the previous chapters so far, but he's also doing extra things that there just wouldn't be time, there just wouldn't be pen and ink enough for John the Apostle to arrange it all, to as the author, to write every single detail down. So he's writing down the key points. Now, one of the things we can say about that is actually, if it's written down, that means it's definitely an important one for us to note. It's not just Jesus's casual love. Actually, there are lots of details here that are good to remember as well. So, some of you may know this passage, but here we are just setting the scene before the big event happens. He's back in his home area, the Sea of Galilee, big lake that has the River Jordan coming in to the top and out through the bottom, and he's crossed over to the far shore. So, verse 5, I'll read again. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, who's one of his disciples, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Ooh, a little bit of a scheme coming along. Nice one, Jesus. So, verse 7. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Okay, I'm gonna stop there and let's just analyse this perspective. Logically, mathematically, half a year's wages. So if you'd put this into a modern setting, let's say now, in England, in 2020, perhaps we'll ignore that there's still lockdown at the moment, but a year's wages. Now, on average in the UK at the moment, the average, and I'm going with the full-time figures, because if we think about back then, people would have had to work full-time in ancient societies. They just have different priorities back then. They kind of need to. So that's the equivalent we're going to have to work with. Now, for us, that is about, in the UK, £35,000 a year, something like that. That's around about the average full-time income. Now, half a year, so let's put that in half. It's about £17,500, and if you go to a supermarket, a loaf of bread normally it costs about £1. So half a year's wages of bread, that is 17,500 loaves of bread. Whew. That's a lot of bread. What's more, if we think about a modern loaf of bread, that is 20 slices per loaf. That is including the big crusts at the end. Who likes a good crust? I don't mind a crust. I like a crust. So that's enough bread per loaf to make 10 sandwiches. So if we have 10 sandwiches per loaf, and each loaf is about £1, we've got 175,000 sandwiches. Wow. We haven't got any filling for them yet, though. But Jesus has got a plan for what are we going to put in our sandwiches. Let's find out. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" So Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. Don't know about you, but I like a good tuna mayo sandwich. I think that's a great filling to have in a sarnie. Now, we don't know if they were making sandwiches. Sandwiches were probably not invented until the 18th century, something like that. But either way, I find it really fascinating to do a little bit of maths like that, to work out exactly how many sandwiches, how much bread, how much stuff is he creating in this very famous miracle of feeding the 5,000. But it's actually more than that. If we look at this, if we look at verse 10, the bit in brackets, about 5,000 men were there. Now, men is just men. Okay? So every man in this society would have a wife and children. Now, it's hard to say exactly how many children there were, but we know that their family size was bigger than it was now. So let's say every man's brought his wife along, and they've also brought 3 children along. So for every one man, actually, we've got 5. So if we think about 5,000, multiply that by 5, and we've got 25,000 people. Now, okay, rough estimates. I'm not a scholar. I don't know exact numbers in terms of like how big were families, how many kids they often have. I don't know. I'm just going for a rough estimate. But we've got 25,000 mouths to feed. Now, we've got enough bread to make 175,000 sandwiches. That is enough for 7 sandwiches each. 7 sandwiches. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel really guilty when I eat like a single Subway. I think that's a lot of bread. I'm going to need to do some exercise to work that off. But 7 sandwiches. Crikey. That's quite filling. And remember that he's also got these, fish to fill it up with as well. Whoa! Now, of course, I'm just kind of doing these numbers for a little bit of fun. But regardless here, we've got a massive amount of food being proposed here. And still, there is some kind of reality put in place. If we look at verse 11, Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated, so the possibly 25,000 people, and they distributed as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. So we're not just talking about proposed numbers, we're talking about in reality. This is what it's looked like. Now, I don't know about you, but something like a blind person being healed. Now, you can imagine that happening. And in fact, if you've seen something like the Wanderlust films, actually, you might have actually seen footage of that actually occurring. This, however, is very difficult to imagine how this actually happened. It would have to be some kind of magic trick, or as Jesus likes to put it, a miracle. But on this huge scale, I can't actually imagine, even with our modern sliced bread, the great invention that we proclaim it to be, even taking that and if you live in a family where there's multiple adults living in the same house, all eating sandwiches, you know how quick a loaf of bread disappears in a couple of days. But this is amongst thousands of people, and it just keeps going. And it's not just sufficient. It's not just you've got enough for your sustenance. It's you are going to get as much as you want. And in that crowd, you may very well have hungry teenage boys who are just going to eat and eat and eat. You're going to have men who work in the fields all day. And if we can relate it at all to, say, the peasants of the medieval period, they would eat 2 to 3 pounds of bread per day, which in metric is at least a kilogram of bread consumed every day, because they were having to work all day in the fields, really long hours. And it was probably the same for these guys, whether they were working in the fields or whether they were fishermen or whether they were shepherds. They would have had to eat a lot. 7 sandwiches, that would fill us up, but it's also going to fill up someone who's going to be working manual labour every day of their life, apart from once a week on the Sabbath. Jesus is creating out of something very small, a little boy's lunchbox, something incredible. So, John goes on. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, and let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over from those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. So here we have the reaction of the people. What are they doing? They are thinking he's the prophet, and it's even insinuated that they want to crown him as king. Jesus knows what's going on. Now, it's an interesting one, because we have this implication at the beginning from when Jesus talks to Philip, and he's just speaking to test him. Jesus knows what's to come. Which means he must have known that the people were going to react like this. They were going to think, oh, he's the big guy, we must lift him up on a pedestal, we must make him king, we must force him to be our leader. And yet, knowing this, Jesus still does this miracle, and he withdraws. Again, we see this. He doesn't want to be centre of attention. He quite literally runs away from it. Now, there's a bit of a pattern here of sometimes folk in the Bible seeing a situation that might tempt them to do something wrong. They make the right decision by just running away. We see this, if you know Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat story, Potiphar's wife. That circumstance, if you know the the musical well, you know what I'm talking about. He literally ran away from that situation, fearful that sexual temptation would be too much of a problem for him. And so he literally runs away. Other times in the Old Testament, you've got something like Elijah up against the prophets of Baal, where the story is basically that God, the God of the Israelites, challenges a false god that a lot of them are praying to at the time, and does this incredible miracle, basically proving them wrong. And in retaliation, Baal is overthrown, the icons are destroyed, and all the prophets are killed, actually. But in response to that, the prophet Elijah, who seemed to be the only one wanting to fight against this false religion, steps out and leads the people in prayer and back to focus on God again. He's actually hunted down and has to run away. It's not quite the same situation, but we still see is when people have the wrong intention, that in this case goes directly against what Jesus is planning. He runs away. He doesn't try to deal with them. He doesn't try to admonish them or debate with them about it. He just runs away. There's something about that teaches us that actually it's fine to run away sometimes. When the situation has got so horrific, so uncontrollable, it's okay to run away. I heard a saying this morning that is, there's nowhere good to stand in a massacre. Meaning, when a situation has gone totally terrible, there is nowhere good to stand. The only thing, the best thing to do is, if you can, get out of there. Go away. And what we also saw is that, where does Jesus run to? He runs to a mountain. Now, Elijah ran to a mountain when he was persecuted. Abraham was told to go and worship God at a mountain. There's loads of stories about where God meets people through their prayers when they're on mountaintops. I love that. I love being on top of mountains and you can see so much. It's like you have a new perspective. And I think in the Bible we have that understanding. Firstly, the physical perspective of just being able to see the land. It renews the mind a bit. But also there's a spiritual reality here. Jesus doesn't want to be swamped by all these people who want to force him to be king. So he runs to a place where he can re-establish perspective. I'm not saying that Jesus ever got it wrong, but he's making it hard for people to get him. It's hard to get a crowd up on top of a mountain. They would have been, well, as we've already discussed, having their families with them. They're not going to want to follow him. He knows he can be alone with his Father, and there is nothing wrong with that. We as Christians follow his example. And even if you're not a Christian, hey, don't be afraid of running away from situations when they get tough. It would be better to run away, to reevaluate, to get the right perspective again, rather than get involved in the muck and possibly be tempted by things that are bad. He knew that the people were going to worship him in a sense, and he didn't want that. What he did want is for them to be supplied. In this case, literally with food. He wanted to show them that God still cares for them by doing this really weird miracle that we just can't visualize it in our mind's eye. He still is providing for them, but he wants to get across a message that no, it's not about me being a big special person that you give all your fame attention to. No, it's not about that. I'm doing this out of humility, because I'm starting with just 5 little loaves and 2 little fish, and out of that I am creating 175,000 tuna mayo sandwiches. Incredible, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. So that was the first of the 2 miracles that we're going to look into today. The next one follows straight afterwards. Jesus has just run off. The disciples haven't gone with him. So, what do? Let's find out. So, jumping in back on verse 16. It's the same day. Presumably the crowd is dispersed and the disciples are still just hanging around. So, when evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. So they're going back to the other side, basically. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. Now, setting a new scene here. It's getting dark. There's a storm brewing. Back then, going out on a boat at night time was very normal if you're a fisherman, and a few of these guys were fishermen. This wouldn't be something out of the ordinary, really. And actually, I live in a seaside town, and I can vouch for the fact that that is still the case. Men in their boats will go out at night time because that seems to be the best time to be catching fish in large quantities, and then they will come back ready to sell what they've caught in the morning. So, you've got a few individuals in this boat, some are Jesus' disciples, who are trained fishermen. They're used to being on this lake, and they, having lost Jesus, are like, okay, well, we'll just go back home then, I guess. It's getting dark. Who knows, maybe they even thought they'd catch some fish on the way back, maybe make some money the next day. Who knows? But, regardless, that's the new scene we have. Verse 19, let's continue. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. Crazy. This is another one of those really wacky, rather famous miracles, walking on water. What the heck is going on here? Jesus has gone sort of like caught up with them. He's like, oh no, my friends are going home. No, I better catch up with them. What's the shortest route? As the crow flies, or as the Jesus walks? There is, in fact, even a lizard. Not sure where in the world it lives, but there is a type of lizard called the Jesus lizard because it's able to walk on water, quite literally. It runs so quick with its wide feet, hitting the surface, that it actually there is enough water tension for it to actually be able to walk across the surface of the water. Isn't that fascinating? But you don't have to be some intellectual to work out that human beings can't just walk on water. So this must be another miracle. Now, I've heard people say to me that, well, you know, he probably just found a convenient sandbank to go across, and you know, he was probably just in the shallows. But I'm not convinced. The fact of the matter is that it says that these people were scared when they saw this. Some of the other eyewitness accounts of the Bible add little bits to this, identify that actually they thought it was a ghost, some of them. We also have an account where actually Peter tries to join Jesus on the water later on. And actually he starts to drown at one point. Now, he is someone who would have known the lay of the land. Now, if Jesus is just finding a convenient sandbank, how can someone that's trying to do the same thing with him, how does someone else start to drown when Jesus is fine? There's all kind of funny things we can do to try to scientifically explain this, but the fact of the matter is, it's written down in this ancient text. The people in the boat, some of whom were sailors, were scared, which suggests that actually this is something out of the ordinary. That they were actually 3 or 4 miles through the lake. So they were in the deep waters. They were not in a place where there would be a convenient sandbank for someone to pretend they're walking on water through. This is a position where actually there's got to be something miraculous behind this explanation. And what's more, and this is another little hidden bit, verse 21, then they were willing to take him into the boat, despite their previous fear, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. What? So Jesus can now teleport boats full of people, basically. Crikey. Now remember, they were in the middle of a storm. Remember that, okay, some of them are trained sailors, but actually you think of boat technology back then, not amazing. You think about how unpredictable the weather is. Well, I mean, in England is terrible. But anywhere where there's water, you get a lot of evaporation off the seas from sunlight. And so storms, especially in hot climates, they can hit at any moment. Totally unpredictable. You never know whether it's going to be a little one or a big one or whatever. Anywhere in between, unpredictable. So, yes, these sailors might have dealt with a few storms in their past, but they were fearful at this point, which means this could have been a really bad one. So again, we have this second miracle set, as I feel that it is actually kind of multiple miracles that are going on at the same time here, where actually we've seen him provide sustenance in terms of food for loads of people so that people eat their fill. Now we see him deliver out of quite literally darkness to a point of safety. And Jesus, in this second instance, is actually doing something miraculous just to get to that point. Now, what can this teach us? Well, it teaches us that actually God still cares about us. No matter if we, firstly, like the big crowds, are really eager to see more from him, so much so that we just want a crowd and just want to receive and want to see stuff, God delivers. But also, secondly, if, like these disciples, we've kind of just like given up on Jesus. No, they didn't go and bother trying to find him. Seemingly, they just tried to go home. And Jesus, still being aware of the troubles that they're going to go through, he still goes to find them. So, Jesus will provide something. Whether we try to purposefully go and seek him, or whether we are trying to run away from him, he's still a provider. I saw recently that film about Mr. Rogers, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and the most precious moment in that film is when Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, being played by Tom Hanks, is talking to the main character, and to help him when they're sitting in, if I believe it's a Chinese restaurant, and he says, just think about all the people who loved you into being, and just take a moment and be quiet. And the whole restaurant goes quiet. And Tom Hanks, the actor, he even looks directly into the camera as if to say, look, you do that too. You do it as well. And then when he gets to it, he doesn't say, haha, see, that was good, wasn't it? No, Mr. Rogers says, thank you for doing that with me. Still possessing such humility even through helping people. And how did Fred Rogers know that? Well, he was a Presbyterian minister. He was well versed in the Bible himself. And his example was Jesus. And we see this. Provision, yet humble. Gifting, yet not attention seeking. We see it in Jesus here. And so when I'm talking about Jesus providing, no matter whether you're running towards him or away from him, you'll be thinking, oh, well, I've been, tottering around in life for decades. I haven't received any provision from Jesus. Think about that thing I just said. Think about as Mr. Rogers did in that film. If you've seen the film, even better. If you haven't, I flipping well recommend it. But just think about all those who have loved you into existence. And when he puts it like that, it made me realise, and I hope it makes you realise, you exist because of love. Isn't that amazing? Now, yeah, it's your parents. They loved you into existence. It's all of their parents before them. They loved you into existence. But actually what Jesus knows and what the Bible is offering is us as an explanation that actually you didn't just come into existence by some sheer chemical accident that happened millions of years ago. You're not just, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says, literally and figuratively simply stardust come together to form a thing. You're not a rock. You're not dust. You've got emotions and feelings. Rocks don't have emotions. You have worth. Rocks don't really have worth. Not compared to you. You're worth so much because God loved you into existence. And yeah, you may have never witnessed a miracle that seems like provision. In the same way that we're seeing in these stories anyway. But actually, it's a miracle that life exists at all. God's provided that, and he's provided food for you daily. He's provided jobs, career, family, friends, hobbies, a nation that looks after us, other nations that look out for each other. Things have gone wrong in this world, yes, but actually it was never meant to be that way. And even through all that is wrong, God still provides. They were in the middle of a storm, and Jesus used a miracle, one to turn up, and two to deliver them out of that storm. Maybe you're going through a storm, a mental storm at the moment, a storm of physical health perhaps. Life is going to throw unpredictable storms at us. We don't know when they're going to crop up, we don't know how big or small they're going to be, how much they're going to impact our finances, how much they're going to impact our relationships. All of these things we just can't say. In fact, in the Old Testament, we're told that it is hevel, meaning it is like smoke. It's there. Sometimes you can't see it, sometimes you can see it and it's thick and it chokes you. Other times you can look at it and it's beautiful, but that's what life is kind of like in this world at the moment. And we can be stuck in the middle of that. Now, God is still providing even if you're running away from him. Even if you're doing it by accident. Even if you're not angry with him and you're just kind of sliding away from him in life. But also, Jesus is definitely going to provide abundantly with at least 7 tuna mayo sandwiches for you. Doesn't seem like there's a vegan option, sorry. I like cheese myself. Maybe there is a vegetarian option one day. But the story here, the message here is that, yeah, God is going to provide for you. He's definitely going to provide abundantly when you seek him. But he's also lovingly able to provide when you don't seek him. But if you don't seek him, you don't necessarily notice it. And I would say that surely it's better to notice all the times we've got. You know, we say count your blessings. How do you know what's a blessing unless you're looking out for it? It's so easy to be negative in this day and age, especially under these conditions at the moment, so easy to focus on all the bad stuff. But think about it. Maybe you don't want to get up. Maybe you don't want to do anything with your day. Well, maybe your family do. Maybe they want you to get up and enjoy the outside and think about all that you can do instead of what you can't have. Then you'll know where your blessings are. Then you'll be able to count them, whether that's metaphorically or literally. You'll be able to identify them. And I'm going to suggest you'll be able to begin to identify where they come from. Because as this Bible is saying, they're actually all coming from Jesus. Now, that's a couple of stories there. We are going to see a lot more explanation. And the last bit of passage I'm going to read is just the last few sentences of the paragraph. So, after the storm has subsided, after everyone is safe, I'm setting the scene here for what we're going to see next time. Jumping in, verse 22. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore, so the side where the feeding of the thousands happened, so at the other shore of the lake, they realised that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but that they had gone away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realised that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. So, the scene is set for next time. The people there are joined by even more people, and they're looking for Jesus. They're trying to find where he is. They must have got a bit of an inkling as to where he'd gone. They're on his tail. They're going to try and track him down. And we're going to see what happens next time when eventually there is another meeting of Jesus and the people. Until then, I hope you are able to count your blessings. I hope you are able to love all that's good around you. You are able to focus on what is pure, on what is jolly, on what is joyful, on what is beautiful, and all things that are worthy of thanksgiving. I pray that you are able to remain healthy, safe, and that you are able to continue loving life. And I hope you've enjoyed this and all that's been happening as part of this little series, whether you are watching this live or later on YouTube, or whether you are listening to the podcast. You are incredibly welcome. You are incredibly loved. And I hope you stay incredibly jolly. As this week pans out, there's going to be more fun stuff in all of our lives. I'm sure there may be more questions come out of this funny old topic with these wacky miracles going on. As usual, if you've got questions, no matter how grueling they are, pop them in the comments, put it in the chat. We want to grapple with those. We don't get to the truth unless we talk about it. So, do that, and until next time, thank you very much for watching or listening. I hope you are well, and until next time, from me, cheerio.